is News 10 at 11.
One passenger says she could see the sky. That's a bad thing when you're in a jet at 36,000 feet. A Southwest Airlines flight heading to Sacramento made an emergency landing in Yuma. A hole ripped open above the plane's middle aisle, almost 6 feet long. The cabin quickly depressurized. The plane dove to 11,000 feet. Loved ones waiting and wondering. Finally, the passengers are brought home to Sacramento. Hours later, safe but rattled. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Dale Shornack. Christina is off. Southwest Airlines tonight is telling us that in all of that in-flight emergency, only one flight attendant was injured, and they say it was just minor injuries that she suffered. Finally, that flight, it was a different plane, but same flight, arrived at Sacramento International just about an hour ago. News 10's Will Frampton is live at the airport tonight with the passengers who have some incredible stories to tell. Will?
Well, Dale, if you've been here to Terminal A before, you know sometimes with the arrivals when people are coming down the escalator, sometimes not a lot of people are waiting for them there. Instead, they come up here on the curb and they pick them up at curbside. Not the case tonight. People parked inside the garage, came inside. They wanted to see first thing their friends, family, and loved ones as soon as they got off this flight. This was supposed to be just another flight and just another airport pickup. But people who came to get their loved ones from Southwest Flight 812 probably will never forget the moment.
We're excited that he's coming home, but it was a little scary at the very beginning.
John Cucaruta and his wife Diane were waiting for their 18-year-old son. Along with a few dozen others, they got to the airport about 30 minutes before the flight landed. About 9:40, passengers started coming down the escalator. Their looks of relief said it all.
Just glad to be here.
And for some, the reunion was overwhelming, too intense to talk about it in front of a camera.
No, thank you. I'm sorry. She's upset. Sorry.
Others recounted the horrible moment when the plane's cabin blew open, when they honestly wondered if they would make it back alive.
Almost passed out. I mean, your ears instantly start to hurt really bad.
It was scary. I was one row from where the plane blew out, and you know, we all had that moment when we thought we weren't sure what was going to happen.
It sounded like a big tire popping in, and the pressure in the cabin was so, it's hard to describe.
On a scale of 1 to 10, about 25. I've never been that scared in my life.
When we could see daylight out of the plane, I go, this is, you know, you always think of people getting sucked out of the airplanes when there's a hole in it, and I was really, it was really scary.
And that last gentleman there also added later that as far as he could tell, they dropped about 10,000 feet in a minute or so, because everyone I've talked to said the blowout happened at 35,000 feet. So they were not climbing. They were already at cruising altitude. Then the blowout happened. They dropped many, many feet rapidly. That's when people had the aching ears, other symptoms of, you know, quick decompression. So that's a lot of what I heard from people, is that their ears were killing them. So besides the horror of the moment, there was some pain involved too, but so far, as we've heard, not many injuries. So we're live at Sacramento International Airport. Yeah, Dale, back to you.
You know, the horror of the moment and dropping that fast, which was deliberate to try to get them down to 10,000 feet where they can breathe again, but it's just amazing that they were all able to stay as calm as they did. I think that's just remarkable given the circumstances. You've got one hole in the plane, you don't know if another one's going to rip open, and everything's going to let loose.
And I heard a lot of that from passengers also. They were very impressed with Southwest Airlines, how they handled it. Of course, how often do you get a hole in the top of your plane, right? Well, the pilots were ready for it, and they got the plane down to a safer altitude quickly, got them on the ground. Everyone is, as far as we know, they're okay.
Yeah, great to hear. Ben, Southwest does have a very, very good safety record. Will, thanks. So it was Southwest Flight 812. It took off this afternoon from Phoenix Airport, Sky Harbor Airport, with no apparent problems. But at some point north of Yuma, just over the border into California, a hole tore open in the fuselage. Immediately, there was a sudden drop in cabin pressure, and the plane made a rapid descent from 36,000 feet cruising altitude down to 11,000 feet, finally then landing safely in Yuma, Arizona. So somewhere tonight, quite possibly out in the desert, there is a portion of that Southwest Airlines flight that may tell investigators what went wrong. We already know tonight that for those passengers to have survived, there's a lot that went right. When this hole blew open in Southwest Flight 812 at cruise altitude, the cabin would have lost pressure in seconds. In a flash, no air to breathe.
Hopefully the passengers have paid attention to the briefing, because they have seconds, and I mean 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, depending on how high they are, to get the mask on their face to keep from passing out.
John Lowry is a former airline pilot and aviation safety expert. He says commercial airliners are designed to survive a structural failure like this and still land safely.
The system worked exactly like it was designed to work. The airplane depressurized, the mask came down, the pilots made an emergency descent. The airplane held together.
The real concern is why routine inspection and maintenance failed to detect a problem in that section of fuselage.
I'm sure they'll be looking for the panel. It'd be of great interest, and I'd be surprised if there wasn't a reward out for recovery of it.
Lowry says Southwest jets endure more stress from shorter flights and more frequent pressurization.
The fuselage, the skin, and the structure takes a lot of stress. It's like if you had a piece of tin in your hand and you bend it back and forth, sooner or later it gets hot and starts to crack and then breaks.
There have been similar failures on commercial airliners, but even when the jet landed safely with a hole in the fuselage, the extreme forces of rapid depressurization have sometimes ended in tragedy.
It sucked several passengers out. I seem to recall 6 passengers, which is just one more reason you should always wear your seatbelt latched in flight.
So when an airline cabin suddenly loses pressure and the masks drop down from the ceiling, the pilots are trained to dive that plane down to 10,000 feet in 2 minutes or less. 10,000 feet where there's breathable air, and then anyone who perhaps passed out before they had a chance to put on their oxygen mask, they would then have air and perhaps regain consciousness without any brain damage from a lack of oxygen. So that's why they make the steep dive. Here's a minute-by-minute breakdown of what happened at 3:59 this afternoon. Everything was fine, flying at 36,000 feet, and then just minutes later the plane plummeted more than 10,000 feet. 2 more minutes pass and the plane dove thousands more feet. In less than 5 minutes, a 23,000-foot difference. Southwest Airlines released a statement tonight about the events. In it, they say, quote, Southwest will work with the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, and the National Transportation Safety Board as they investigate the events. Everything you just saw on this story and more can be found on news10.net, including a slideshow of all of the images coming in from the incident.